Millionaire CEO gave a black credit card to test the homeless girl on the street. What she did next changed everything. It was one of those late autumn mornings in New York where the chill did not just touch your skin, it seeped into your bones. The sky was slate gray, the streets damp from a light overnight drizzle, and steam curled from sewer grates, like the city itself was exhaling. Caleb Maddox stepped out of a sleek glass office tower on Fifth Avenue, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate despite the humidity. A leather briefcase hung at his side, and his polished shoes tapped crisply against the wet concrete. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold steel. The morning meeting had not gone well. Not that his face showed it. Caleb had long mastered the art of neutrality, but behind that calm exterior a storm brewed. Numbers questioned. Board members doubted, and trust, his most sacred currency, had been fractured once again. As he crossed the street toward the busier side of the avenue, someone caught the corner of his eye. At an aging bus stop with cracked glass panels and rust bleeding through the frame, a group of the city's forgotten huddled close together. Some sat wrapped in donated blankets. Others stared blankly into nothing, cupping empty coffee cups for change. And then there was her, a young woman, maybe mid-20s. Her golden hair, though messy, cascaded over her shoulders in soft waves. She wore a worn-out oversized coat with frayed sleeves and mismatched buttons. Her jeans were torn, her boots scuffed beyond recognition. But she was not begging. She was not holding a sign. She was not sleeping. She was reading. A tattered paperback rested in her lap, fingers delicately holding the spine open. Then, without a word, she broke a piece of her sandwich in half and extended it to an elderly man sitting beside her. He looked at her in surprise, nodded, and accepted it. She smiled faintly, closed her book, and tucked her half of the sandwich away. She did not eat it. Caleb's steps slowed. He watched, puzzled. She had so little. Why would she share it? It defied logic. In his world, generosity came with a price. Always, especially from those who had nothing. And yet here she was, disproving the algorithms that had made him rich. No hand held out, no plea for spare change, just silence and a strange sense of dignity. Something stirred in Caleb's chest. Something unfamiliar, impulsive. He stepped toward her. The girl looked up as his shadow fell across her, shielding her from the gray morning light. Their eyes met. Hers were blue, clear, sharp, watchful, not afraid, not desperate, just focused. Without a word, Caleb reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek jet black credit card. Matte finish, metallic edges, a black card, unlimited credit. The kind of power that could rewrite a life in an afternoon. He slid the card into a white envelope, sealed it, and extended it toward her. "You can use this however you like," he said, his voice calm, unreadable. "I'll be back at 8. See you tonight." The girl blinked, her fingers hesitated before they took the envelope. She looked at him, not like someone who just received a miracle, but like someone trying to figure out the catch. There was no catch. Caleb waited a beat longer, then turned and walked away. Not another word. A gust of wind swept through the street as he disappeared into the crowd, his silhouette blending with the gray coats and umbrellas. The girl stared at the envelope for a long moment, then tucked it carefully inside her worn coat. Noon around her had noticed, but the question lingered in the air, heavier than the fog rolling in off the river. What would she do now? With a card that could buy her everything, would she spend it? Would she vanish? Would she betray the quiet dignity he had seen in her? Or would she do something else entirely? No one knew. Not even her. Not yet. Caleb Maddox was 34 years old, founder and CEO of Maddox Tech, a financial technology company that had reshaped algorithmic investing. A self-made millionaire before 30, he was known for his cold efficiency, unmatched logic, and ruthless decision-making. He had built his empire on numbers. Data did not lie. People, on the other hand, always did. His father, a corporate attorney, had once told him, "Trust is a liability, not an asset." Caleb had believed that early on. He didn't invest in people. only performance, predictability, and patterns. But what once was quiet cynicism had lately hardened into something colder. Just 3 weeks ago, the only person Caleb had ever truly trusted, his longtime assistant and closest friend, was caught embezzling over $2 million from the company's charity fund. It wasn't just theft. It was betrayal, the kind that shattered something deeper than spreadsheets and shareholder meetings. Caleb handled the fallout swiftly and silently. Legal walls went up. The press never caught wind. The board moved on, but Caleb didn't. Since then, a belief had frozen into place inside him. People are only good until they're given the chance not to be. He saw it everywhere now. Fake smiles, kindness wrapped in expectation, integrity up for sale. Everyone had a price. The only question was how high. And yet this morning at a broken-down bus stop on East 65th Street, a woman in a ragged coat had done something that broke the pattern. She had split her last meal and handed half to someone else. Why? It didn't make sense. It challenged every model he had coded into his systems, every assumption he held about human behavior. So on impulse, Caleb reached into his wallet and pulled out a black credit card. Unlimited credit, unlimited temptation, unlimited choice. He handed it to her like a scientist placing a subject in a controlled test. Except this time, the variable wasn't just her. It was him too. What would she do? And beneath all his logic, a quiet voice whispered, "Prove me wrong, please." Across the street, far from the sleek boardrooms and glass towers where Caleb lived, a figure sat curled on the sidewalk, her breath visible in the cold. That girl was Quinn, 26 years old. Once she had been a scholarship student at a top psychology program, praised for her insight and passion for trauma recovery in children. But then came the unraveling. Her mother, a nurse, was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. Ilara dropped out to care for her and raise her 7-year-old brother after their father left. She worked endlessly, dishwashing, tutoring, warehouse shifts. When her mother passed, Ara was left with grief, debt, and a child to feed. Desperate for shelter, she answered an ad for a cheap room. It was a scam. They stole her savings, ID, and social security card. She reported it, but nothing happened. Within weeks, she and her brother were homeless. He was eventually placed in foster care and was left alone. That was over a year ago. Since then, she had slept in shelters, under bridges, behind churches. But she had rules. Rules she never broke. She did not beg. She did not steal. She did not numb herself to survive. What she did do every day was right. In a battered leather notebook, Ara documented everything. Thoughts, lessons, patterns, pain. With the mind of a scientist and the heart of a poet, she wrote to stay sane, to stay herself, because survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about not losing who you are in the process. "I can lose everything," she once wrote, "but I cannot lose who I am." So when a stranger in a $1,000 code handed her a black credit card and told her to use it however she wanted, Ara didn't see it as charity. She saw it for what it was. A test. He was watching to see if she would trade her principles for comfort. She looked into his eyes, not with desperation, but with something stronger, sharper. He thinks he's testing me, she thought. But maybe I'm testing him too. Would he assume she'd betray herself? Would he expect her to vanish and prove his theory? Not today. Two people, two worlds. One sat atop a kingdom of code and cynicism, rich in logic but bankrupt in faith. The other lived on concrete and memory, poor in possessions but wealthy in principle. And between them sat a black card, not a gift, not a transaction, a mirror. Neither of them knew it yet. But this quiet morning would rewrite everything. Morning crept into midday, and the city grew louder. The rush hour crowds gave way to the hum of taxis, the hiss of brakes, the distant echo of a saxophone. Our Quinn walked slowly along the damp sidewalk, hands tucked deep into her frayed coat. Pressed against her ribs, hidden inside the lining, was the envelope, the black cart still untouched. She had barely slept. The cement had been cold, the city loud. but her mind had been louder, replaying one unrelenting thought. What do you do with something that could change your life when you promised yourself never to be changed by money? Temptation met her at every corner. On Lexington Avenue, the smell of coffee and fresh bagels drifted from a cafe. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't eaten a full meal in nearly 20 hours. She lingered at the window. Inside, a toddler giggled over cocoa while his mother wiped crumbs from his face. Her hand hovered near her coat pocket. One swipe, one meal, one moment of warmth. She pulled her hand back. A few blocks later, she stopped in front of a used bookstore. Through the window, a worn copy of The Body Keeps the Score caught her eye. She had once studied it in college before everything fell apart. That book had changed how she saw trauma and herself. Her fingers twitched again, but no, it wasn't luxury she was resisting. It was relief, temporary fleeting comfort at the cost of something deeper. She remembered her mother's voice, her brother's eyes. Aileen, she once wrote in her journal, "Every time you trade your values for survival, you lose a piece of the reason you wanted to survive." Near Bryant Park, she heard a voice. Ara. It was Marcus, a fellow street dweller, a former mechanic who now slept 2 blocks down. His eyes dropped to the envelope she'd been clutching. "That a black card?" She didn't answer. He chuckled. "If it is, you should hit an ATM, grab $5,000 and vanish. You know, no one hands those out without expecting something." She gave a small smile. "Maybe this one's different." Marcus shook his head. "Nothing's ever different. Just make sure you're the one pulling the strings." He walked off and she was alone again. As afternoon dimmed, the wind sharpened. She turned down a side street and spotted a child curled near a cart no older than 9. Her face pale and hollow. Ara knelt down. "You okay?" The girl barely nodded. Ara reached into her coat, pulled out the last half of her sandwich. Dry bread, wilted cheese, but it was something. She tore it and handed the larger piece to the girl. The child's eyes lit up. "Thanks. Eat slow," Hilara said softly. She stood, shoving her frozen hands back into her pockets. Her fingertips brushed the envelope again. Still sealed. As dusk settled over the city, the skyline flickered alive. Streets buzzed with commuters heading home. Ara turned back toward the bus stop where it had all begun. The card remained where it had been since morning, untouched, unused. Her legs ached, her stomach protested. Her future hadn't changed, but her pride was still hers. "If I spend even a cent," she thought, "then I'm saying I have a price and I don't. I'm poor, but I am not bought." The city slowed as the sky deepened into navy blue. A soft hush spread across the streets, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a cab driver weaving through yellow-lit intersections. Caleb Maddox checked his watch. 7:58 p.m. He stood across the street from the same broken bus stop, hands in his coat pockets, his eyes fixed on the dim corner where everything had begun that morning. She was there exactly where he had left her. She sat upright on the cold bench, her coat drawn tighter around her shoulders, her expression unreadable in the dying light. A single street lamp flickered above her head like a spotlight in an otherwise forgotten scene. Caleb crossed the street. She stood as he approached, calm, steady. There was no hesitation in her body, no fear, no performance. In her hands was the same white envelope. She held it out to him. He took it. Their eyes met for a moment. He searched for signs. Shame, guilt, manipulation, even pride. There was none, only quiet honesty. He opened the envelope. The black card sat inside perfectly untouched. Beneath it, folded once, was a piece of notebook paper torn neatly from the edge of a journal. He unfolded it. The handwriting was small but clean. One sentence. "I do not need this to know who I am. But thank you for believing I had the choice." Caleb did not move. The air between them thickened, but not with awkwardness, rather with something heavier. Respect. Ara stepped back as if that was all she came to do, to return what was never hers, to end something before it turned into something else. But Caleb stopped her with a question, one he did not plan to ask, but it came anyway. Did you ever think about using it? She looked at him, not offended, not defensive, just truthful. Yes, she said more than once. A beat passed. But I would rather go hungry than owe myself an explanation for why I spent something that was never mine. She tucked her hands back into her coat. Surviving is hard, but surviving with self-respect, that's harder. I'm trying to do the harder thing. She turned to go, but something inside Caleb shifted. Snapped, maybe. The kind of snap that happens when a foundation cracks just enough to let light in. He looked down at the envelope in his hand, then back at the woman walking away from power like it meant nothing. For a man who had built an empire on assumptions, data, and human predictability, this was the most unpredictable thing he had seen in years. He had tested her, and she had passed a test he never could have passed himself. As he walked back into the city's neon glow, the sentence on the paper echoed in his head. Thank you for believing I had the choice. No one had thanked him like that before. Not for power, not for money, not for opportunity, but for respect. And it hit him hard and fast. She had not needed the card to prove anything because she already knew her worth. She was not trying to earn value. She simply was valuable. For the first time in Caleb's life, money had failed to control the outcome. And strangely, that did not scare him. It humbled him deeply. He slid the envelope into his coat pocket, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He would see her again, not because he had more tests to give, but because maybe for the first time ever, he had something to learn. The photo hit the internet just after midnight. It was grainy, taken from across the street. But the moment it captured was unmistakable. Caleb Maddox, the stoic tech mogul, handing a white envelope to a young disheveled blonde woman sitting at a bus stop. Within hours, it had gone viral. The caption beneath it read, "Millionaire CEO pays mystery homeless chic girl PR stud," or something more. By morning, every gossip blog, finance forum, and social media feed was ablaze with speculation, memes, hashtags, theories. They called her the subway sugar baby, Regan Cinderella High's experiment. No one knew her name. No one cared. The headlines painted the narrative faster than truth could catch up. Paparazzi stalked the area near Bryant Park. Reporters questioned Maddox Tech's press team. Random bystanders claimed they had seen the girl before, all offering contradictory details. Ara Quinn felt the shift before she even saw the coverage. That morning, as she approached the church steps where she usually slept, a volunteer looked at her with narrowed eyes and said the shelter was at capacity. It was not. Later at the public restroom, someone spit near her shoes and muttered, "We all know who you are." But the worst came in the park. She was sitting under a tree, writing quietly in her notebook, when a half-eaten sandwich landed beside her, tossed by a woman who sneered, "Buy your own food next time." Faker. Two teens took photos of her and laughed. Another man shouted, "How much did he pay you? You playing the long con or what?" The people she once shared soup with avoided her eyes. One man she had given a blanket to last winter turned his back as she passed. Rumors had done what money could not. They rewrote her identity. Yara walked away from the park with her head low, not because she was guilty, but because there is a certain kind of humiliation that sticks even when you have done nothing wrong. That night, she returned to the one place she thought might feel safe. The library steps downtown, but even there, someone had scrolled in chalk, "Fake beggar, billionaire's plaything." It was not just cruelty. It was exile. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the small collection of items she had kept. The backpack Caleb had left for her, the library card, the folded note with his neat handwriting. She laid them gently on the library steps. She would not keep what others now used against her. As she turned to leave, she looked once more at the city lights and thought, "I never asked for any of this. I never took advantage. I never even used the card." But it did not matter. In the court of public perception, innocence was irrelevant. Only the spectacle remained. "I do no task for kindness," she whispered to herself. But people give it like it is a trophy and snatch it back like punishment the moment you do not perform the way they want. She vanished from that night like a shadow swallowed by concrete. No word, no destination, only silence. When Caleb Maddox saw the photo, he paused mid-meeting. He knew instantly what it meant. The envelope, the angle, the assumptions. By the time he called his assistant to get a team on it, the storm had already made landfall. They told him she had been harassed, forced out of her usual shelter, that she had left behind everything he had given her. He stared at the items now sitting on his desk. Quiet, ordinary things. A library card, a note she had not responded to. A backpack. He felt something cold crawl up his spine. For a man who spent his life calculating risk, predicting impact, building fail-safes, he had not seen this coming. And worst of all, he had never asked her if she wanted to be part of the experiment. "I gave her a test," he murmured to himself, voice hollow. "And the world punished her for passing it." For the first time in years, Caleb Maddox felt something more disorienting than regret. He felt shame. The boardroom was cold, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the silence, the kind that always came before someone politely ended your career. Caleb Maddox sat at the head of the glass table, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. Around him, senior board members flipped through printed news stories, trending hashtags, and the now viral photo. The photo, the envelope, the girl. "R. Quinn," one board member said, like her name was a scandal in itself. "We have a PR disaster." "She's not even an employee," Caleb replied. "Call, that doesn't matter." Another snapped. "You gave her a black card." The internet already decided what that means. A third voice chimed in, quieter but firmer. "3 major partners have threatened to pull out, unless we issue a formal statement." Caleb leaned back slightly, then issue one. A printed document slid across the table toward him. "We've drafted a disavowal. We frame it as a personal lapse in judgment. You acted out of emotion. It was misunderstood. It won't happen again." And if I don't sign it, there was no anger in his voice, just the weight of inevitability. The lead board member folded his hands. "Then we vote to review your role as CEO. Investors don't tolerate instability." Caleb glanced at the skyline outside, the city glowing against the glass. 10 years of building Maddox Tech. 10 years convincing the world that logic and data mattered more than emotion. Now everything, his name, his power, his future, came down to one decision. Would he erase a woman who never asked to be seen? He looked at his hands, then stood. "Call the press," he said. "I'll speak for myself." 2 hours later, he sat under the lights of a television studio. The host smiled politely. Off camera, producers counted down. 3, 2, 1. "Mr. Maddox," the host began. "Can you clarify your connection to Aurora Quinn, the woman in the viral photo?" Caleb didn't smile. He looked into the camera. "I gave her a credit card," he said. "Not to rescue her, not to sponsor her. I gave it to see what she'd do." He paused. "And she did nothing with it. Not because she was afraid. Not because she was weak, but because she already knew who she was. She didn't need my money to prove it." The host blinked. The studio went still. Caleb continued. "I used to think money revealed a person's true character. That if you gave someone power, you'd see who they really were. And I was right, just not in the way I expected." He leaned forward. "She showed me something no algorithm could predict. Integrity. Even when no one was watching." Another pause. "I'm not standing by Ara because she needs me. I'm standing by her because she didn't flinch. And I refuse to be part of a world that punishes people for passing tests they never asked to take." The host cleared his throat. "So you're not issuing an apology?" Caleb met his gaze. "I'm issuing a correction." The clip spread like wildfire. A billionaire defending a homeless woman on live television was not the narrative anyone expected, but it was the one that resonated. Overnight, the conversation shifted. Media outlets that mocked her now called her remarkable. Forums once filled with ridicule now searched her past with empathy, not scorn. She was no longer a controversy. She was a question the world didn't know how to answer. Caleb didn't check the stock price the next morning. He didn't read the headlines or track the hashtags. All he cared about now was one thing. Where was she? The city had quiet corners if you knew where to look. Caleb Maddox found one of them in a downtown community library. A modest brick building tucked between two laundromats where the fluorescent lights buzzed softly and the shelves leaned slightly from decades of wear. He had been searching for weeks, not with bodyguards or press teams, but alone, quietly, determined. There were no credit card logs to trace, no social media clues. Ara Quinn had disappeared without a digital footprint. Until now, he had come to the library out of instinct, not expectation. She had once told him she liked to read in places that didn't expect anything from her. On a whim, he asked the librarian if they had any notebooks or community journals left behind by visitors. The woman returned with a small stack. Old composition books, some children's scribbles, others filled with poetry or sketches. But one notebook stood out. Simple, worn, its pages filled with handwritten reflections, philosophical musings, and personal stories, some heartbreaking, some fiercely hopeful. The handwriting was unmistakable. Caleb flipped through the pages slowly, his chest tightening. He recognized her voice in every sentence. One passage read, "You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are the way you chose to respond. Another, homelessness is not a character flaw. It's a circumstance. Dignity is not lost in poverty. It's revealed there." He read for hours. It was not just a notebook. It was a manuscript. With the help of a literary contact, Caleb traced key phrases through old blog forums and scanned uploads, Reddit threads, Tumblr reblogs, library archives. They all pointed to one thing: a self-published, anonymously written booklet that had been circulating in shelters, recovery groups, and online communities for nearly 2 years. Silent Room's Bravehearts. Author unknown. It had helped thousands. Quoted in forums, photocopied in halfway houses, left on church pews. He had come to the library out of instinct, not expectation. She had once told him she liked to read in places that didn't expect anything from her. On a whim, he asked the librarian if they had any notebooks or community journals left behind by visitors. The woman returned with a small stack, old composition books, some children's scribbles, others filled with poetry or sketches. But one notebook stood out, simple, worn, its pages filled with handwritten reflections, philosophical musings, and personal stories. Some heartbreaking, some fiercely hopeful. The handwriting was unmistakable. Caleb flipped through the pages slowly, his chest tightening. He recognized her voice in every sentence. One passage read, "You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are the way you chose to respond. Another, homelessness is not a character flaw, it's a circumstance. Dignity is not lost in poverty, it's revealed there." He read for hours. It was not just a notebook, it was a manuscript. With the help of a literary contact, Caleb traced key phrases through old blog forums and scanned uploads, Reddit threads, Tumblr reblogs, library archives. They all pointed to one thing: a self-published, anonymously written booklet that had been circulating in shelters, recovery groups, and online communities for nearly 2 years. Silent Room's Bravehearts. Author unknown. It had helped thousands. Quoted in forums, photocopied in halfway houses, left on church pews. And now, for the first time, Caleb knew the truth. Ara Quinn had not just survived hardship, she had given others the tools to survive theirs. She had never been the rescued. She had always been their skewer. Caleb stood in the middle of the library, holding the notebook to his chest, overcome by a feeling that surprised him. Not admiration, not awe, love, but not the kind built on saving someone. The kind built on discovering them. He finally found her a week later, leading a quiet writing workshop at a women's resource center on the Lower East Side. She sat in a circle with 5 young women, notebooks in hand, sharing laughter and silence in equal measure. She saw him before he could speak. She didn't flinch. She smiled. She smiled. When the class ended, she walked toward him with the calm of someone who no longer ran for being seen. He met her in the middle of the hallway, still holding her notebook in his hands. "You wrote for the whole world," he said softly, "and never signed your name. I just want to be the one person who knows who you are." She looked at him for a long moment, then gave a small, knowing laugh. "You didn't find me, Caleb," she said. "I came back because I'm finally ready for someone to know." There was no rescue in his eyes, no pity in hers. Just two people standing on even ground, stripped of titles, past mistakes, and power. He stepped closer. "I didn't fall for the girl on the street," he whispered. "I fell for the woman who refused to lose herself, even when the world tried to take everything." Her eyes softened, her voice quiet. "I didn't need you to believe in me," she said. "But I think I needed someone to see me, Shima." "I see you," he said. They stood there in the hallway of a place built for healing, surrounded by stories, and started writing their own. The lecture hall wasn't grand. Rows of mismatched chairs filled the space, and hand-painted quotes lined the walls. Messages about healing, resilience, and second chances. At the front stood Ara Quinn, her blonde hair tied loosely, her voice steady as she addressed a group of students and community members. Behind her on the whiteboard she had written, "Your worth is not measured by your lowest moment." She paused, eyes scanning the room. "I used to believe people like me didn't belong anywhere," she said. "That the world didn't have a place for those who had nothing. But I was wrong. A breath. Because no one can take from you what you never agreed to sell." Soft applause followed, honest, quiet. Some in the room were students. Others had once lived on the street like she had. All of them knew what it meant to fight for dignity. Ara had returned, not just to survive, but to give back. She now taught psychology in a community program funded by the Maddox Foundation. Her name was no longer hidden, her story no longer something to be ashamed of. Later that afternoon, with the sun casting gold across the sidewalk, Ara walked past the street where her story had changed. The old bus stop was gone, replaced by a small community resource booth. Benches, blankets, warm tea, and volunteers. She stopped. On the corner bench sat a girl, maybe 17, curled up, eyes distant and tired. Ara didn't say a word. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small notebook, and tucked it beside the girl. On the first page were 3 words: "You matter. Start here." Beside it, a library card and a folded note. "The world isn't always fair, but you get to choose how you meet it." No lecture, no speech, just a quiet offering. Then walked away, the wind brushing past her like an old companion. That evening, in the garden behind the center, now blooming with wild herbs and flowers, she led a small workshop for young people healing from hardship. It was here, among laughter and life, that Caleb Maddox appeared. No tailored suit, no security detail, just a navy sweater and a small wooden box in his hand. Students moved aside as he approached. Ara looked up, raising an eyebrow, half curious, half amused. He didn't speak immediately. Only when the garden quieted did he begin. "You once refused to use a black card," he said gently. "But you used your heart to change the world I live in." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring. No diamond, just a small inscription. "Stay who you are." He knelt. Not on marble, not under chandeliers, but in the place where her healing had first begun. "No promises of fortune," he said. "No empires, just this. I'll never ask you to stop being who you are to be with me." He looked up, voice soft. "You may not need me, Alara, but I want to spend my life becoming the kind of man who deserves you." Her eyes filled not with fear but peace. She whispered, "Yes," and the garden erupted in quiet, joyful applause. Weeks later, they married in a small community chapel decorated with wildflowers and donated candles. The guests weren't famous. They were people she had once sat beside on park benches, children she had taught, survivors she had helped believe again. Balara walked down the aisle in a gown sewn by a woman from her shelter days. Caleb waited for her. No tie, no titles, just hands open, eyes steady. As they stood before the crowd, he leaned close. "Thank you for not spending the card," she smiled. "I did spend it," she whispered. "I used it to buy your attention." They both laughed, and somewhere in the back, an old man in a worn coat clapped the loudest, because love, they had learned, was never about wealth. It was always about choice, and they had both chosen freely, fully, and forever. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartwarming tales that inspire, heal, and touch the soul. We share emotional, real-life, and fictional stories every week, reminding you that kindness, courage, and love still exist in this world. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment that might just change your day or your life.